Hello and welcome to the video. This is going to be a review of the £440 mystery bounty tournament that I went on to win back in February earlier this year for about £33,000. And a lot of the footage was cards up from like the last 2 or 3 tables, so that presents a great opportunity to review the hands, to learn, to see where I could have played better, where I played well, where I need to improve. I'm going to be reviewing the footage with my friend Max. He's a professional tournament player, a very good player. He's been a professional for over 10 years now, so his analysis is going to be very useful. Just a small note about the audio, it at times will go slightly robotic for me because my mic is a bit dodgy. It will be temporary when it does happen, so please just bear with it. Well, without further ado, please enjoy this tournament review. This is already pretty deep. You can see in the top left of the top right of the screen here, 22 out of 448. So we're way into the money here. The mystery bounties at this point are not as important. There is still some big ones in play, but I can't give you an exact figure of like which bounties are in play and how many chips it's worth. But it is just something to bear in mind that this is a bounty tournament. So we're going to be getting a better price whenever we're putting someone else at risk. They're going to be getting a better price if they put us at risk. So it is going to change things a little bit, but as that becomes more relevant, we'll just discuss it at the time. So the only other thing to say is my chip stack here is wrong. I think I have over 1 million chips here, or like a pretty big stack. So it's just going to be wrong for the first few hands, but I'm sure we'll figure it out as we go.
One thing to add as well, guys, is when you get deep in a bounty tournament, if it's not a progressive bounty where there's specific numbers we can assign to chips, but even when there is, it's important to note that where the bounties get worth less, also there's ICM in play as well. So ranges can sometimes end up not being that dissimilar. I don't know if you'd agree, and Brandon, you've done a bit more work on mystery bounties than me, but where we're getting a slightly better price because of the mystery bounty, we're getting a slightly worse price because of the risk premium of ICM. So sometimes the ranges end up being kind of similar to a vanilla anyway at this stage.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess the only thing I would say is if when we cover people, we do want to expand our range because we've got more potential that we can bust them and get that extra incentive of the bounty prize. But the way that we want to expand our range when we're more shallow is usually with bigger cards. And when we're more deeper, it's usually with more potential hands like suited aces, suited connectors, that sort of thing. So given it's quite deep in the tournament, stacks are probably going to be generally more shallow. So if I cover everyone, I might be more inclined to open, say, a king six suited, queen eight suited type of hand, ace eight offsuit, as opposed to pocket twos, 6-4 suited, like a hand that would be better if you're deeper stacked.
Yeah, I think that's a good principle to just mention just across general deep runs in tournaments that when stats get shallow, the 7-6 suited's going down in value, the queen jack off, king six, queen eight, jack eight, like you said, suited all going up in value. I think that's just a good point to drive home, because sometimes you can look at a cut-off range and perhaps 5-4 suited's in there and queen three suited isn't, but at this stage of the tournament you might actually prefer the queen three suited of those two combos, for example.
Yeah, exactly that. We will see a lot more calling going on in live poker as opposed to the theory side, because theory usually will play a lot more free bet or fold, especially with more shallow stacks. But people like to get involved. They like to call with good hand or hands with a lot of potential, like the suited connectors, the small pairs. So that is going to adjust how we play slightly. We're going to be playing out of position more. We're going to play multi-way more, but that's part of the fun of it, trying to solve these problems as we go. I've opened with ace king here. My stack says it's pretty short. I'm just going to assume that I'm deep enough to cover both players for the purpose of this hand. I'm pretty sure that I am. From the small blind, king jack offsuit calls. I think that seems like a reasonable call to me. We're quite short-handed here, right? We're seven-handed. And if I'm the big stack, I'm going to be opening pretty wide. So I think you can get away with the king jack off call in the small blind there. What do you think?
I think it's reasonable. I feel like I'd prefer peeling king queen and three betting something like king jack, just immediately getting you to fold ace jack and king queen off and being able to target those. Whereas a hand like king queen off is going to keep in the more dominated combos you're going to open, and it can't get anything that it dominates to fold. As well as the fact, as we've established, there's a little bit of ICM in play. In general, we want to be playing less calls, particularly when we're going to be playing out of position, particularly against a covering player. If he makes it, let's say 140k here, for example, he's going to immediately make you fold lots of hands that are either dominating him or doing very well against him. And if you shove, you're mostly going to have hands that crush him. So I think it's probably somewhat reasonable, but I'd just prefer to say defend this out of the big blind than use it more as a three bet in the small blind and stick to more of a suited heavy range from the small blind with just a little bit more playability post flop.
Would you be more inclined to call on the button here if you had the king jack?
Yes, I think when you've got absolute position, it definitely makes a bit of a bigger difference. Also, it's the fact that you're then going to be also out of position to the big blind, who once you complete in the small blind, you're given a really, really good price. So it's not just the fact that he's out of position to you, the big stack that's opening with the stronger range. It's that the big blind is going to be over incentive to come along versus the small blind compared to the button, and then you're out of position against both players. So yes, absolutely, we can play a few more pills, I'd say, from the button.
Yeah, that's another really good point. As we can see here, 10-5 suited now getting a really good price, just getting one big blind to call into a pot of what is now going to be what, 7 big blinds, and has a really good 30% equity against all the hands here.
I also think, by the way, 10-5 is probably fairly close again, 22 left. Yeah, it's probably reasonable, but the absolute bottom, I would imagine. And I probably would look to maybe fold if the button was involved, like I said, because our position against both players, you under-realize equity down the street.
I think if we covered anyone, then I would never fold. The fact that we're covered by both players, definitely less incentive to get involved here, because there's times where we might flop a marginal hand, like maybe we flop a 10 flush draw here, and usually would be pretty happy to get it in with some fold equity, but with the bounty element, it's a good chance that people are going to run it a little bit wider.
Yeah, I think it's really important again to just drive home that point. As soon as we're in the money, and particularly deep here, last 20, we're just not as incentivized to play flops post flop, because when you're covered, you're going to be forced to overfold, because compared to what you would theoretically continue mathematically in a chip EV situation, you're forced to slightly overfold because chips you put into the pot are obviously worth less and lose than chips you win. You know, same as when you're calling a shove or something pre-flop. I'm sure lots of you watching are familiar with the idea. You know, you can't call off as wide in ICM as you can in chip EV because of your risk of ruin. It's kind of same for every chip you put in the pot that you're going to lose. It's just worth less than the chips you win. So you wouldn't want to take a coin flip for all of your chips in ICM, because being out of the tournament 50% of the time is way worse than doubling up 50% of the time. You can kind of apply that to every decision you make when you're going to the streets. Whereas when it comes to shoving, sometimes you're going to have a little bit more incentive to shove a bit wider pre-flop, because you have that fold equity and you don't have to go into that post-flop situation, particularly multi-way.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. How would you approach with the ace king here once we face 2 checks, given that we are in position against both of these players? We do have a hand that can dominate hands, like if I check back here and we turn a king against the king jack, we turn an ace if this guy maybe has ace 5, this is obviously good, but we also have our strong under the gun +1 range, we cover everyone. We have the ace of diamonds for the backdoor flush draw, we have good equity against the call-in range. There is less incentive for people to start bluffing us because it's a bounty and we cover them, like we're not going to make any tight folds here, so would you like to approach this with a c-bet or a check in general?
You made some really clean points there. With the way ranges work, I think I would just end up using the ace of diamonds blocker to start pressurizing. It's not that we're going to get tons of better hands to fold. Off the top of my head, we might get the small blind to fold some pocket 4s, 5s, and 6s that don't have a diamond. We might get the big blind to fold a hand like 5-3 suited with no backdoor. You know, there's very few hands we're going to get to immediately fold that we're doing well against. Sorry, that are doing very well against us. But I do believe that we're going to get check raised very infrequently. Their ranges are very capped. The small blind won't ever have even the queens, probably not even the jacks portion of his range. The big blind never has a pair bigger than pocket 6s, in my opinion. They're just always all in pre-flop. It's hard for either of them to have 2 pair. It's a very disconnected board where even the big blind we mentioned is getting this really good price. Don't think he's ever going to have an offsuit combo of 2 pair. He's not going to have queen 3 off or queen 7 off, and he won't even definitely have queen 3 suited. As you know, as we established, he's meant to be playing slightly tighter. But let's assume he does have those. He only has the 7-3, queen 3, and queen 7 suited. He maybe has pocket 3s, pocket 7s, possibly jam pre. And yeah, the small one's going to have 7s and 3s, but again, doesn't always have ace queen. You block king queen and ace queen. I just think there's lots of good things that happen if we just make a small bet right now.
That was my thought at the time too. And seeing as this is a live poker review, I think trying to see if we can get any information as we can actually see the players we're against would always be useful too. And I think in this hand, if I remember right, so I don't know if Callum's has already checked there, but you can see that he kind of is a bit distracted. He seems like he's somewhere else in this hand at the moment to me.
He looks very disinterested, I agree.
Yeah, and that can be for some people like the super nuts, but I think it is generally quite polar when people have this. Like while I'm tanking here, which is like I'm deciding whether to see, but obviously he knows he's not in the hand anymore. He's not going to check call. He's not going to check raise. Maybe if he improves on the turn, he might be interested, but right now he has no interest in this hand, and I think that does give me that little bit of extra information that my c-bet's going to get through the big blind here, and when that's true, I think given we've got 63%, if I can just win the hand now, that's going to be great for me. I've got good barrels, I've got good equity against the call range, so I think in game there is a chance that might have pushed me over the edge if I was on the fence. Maybe I was c-betting anyway, but in a closer spot, maybe that would have pushed me over the edge too.
Based on our previous discussions and having played live with you as well, obviously a few times, that's definitely a place where you excel. Just really paying attention, and it's important to everybody watching to be aware of that kind of thing at the table. It's sometimes that myself, from very much an online background, can miss live. Sometimes I'm on my phone a little bit too much and perhaps not fully zoned into things like that. But yeah, now I'm watching this footage. Callum just does not seem interested. Now, yeah, sure, if he sat there with pocket 3s and he's just trying to look weak, fair play to him. But there's going to be far more often he's going to have the 10-5 of spades or something of that nature than he's going to have the pocket threes, right? The other thing I think that's important to say here is that we are going to cap ourselves when we check it. And I think that it's not necessarily an issue. It's just that it's nice to remain uncapped, be able to call a check raise using our good blockers, even if this hand, let's say, is supposed to mix some checks, some bets in theory, given the fact that, like I say, we want to remain uncapped, we've got really good blockers, and we cover. In general, we will just be allowed to make a few more C bets than usual anyway. So given that all the above, even if it was someone was to show me a three-way solve here and it was supposed to be heavy check with a small bit of bet, I would still lean towards betting for those reasons. And in ICM, like I say, you just get to put more money in when you're the big stack. So definitely like the C bet.
And this is such a complex situation. It's like with ICM, with bounties, with so many tables left, with live poker ranges, live poker responses. We're never going to have a true answer. So we're just always going to try and use our intuition here. And glad that I came to the C bet there. Glad it worked.
And that's just another kind of example as well, right? Of the way that ICM works in the ranges. You make a really small bet, and he is forced to fold King of Diamonds, Jack. You know, overcard, big diamond, blocker to some of your good hands, backdoor flush draw. Where perhaps in a chippy V environment, that might be the kind of hand that would consider a check raise bluff. He just doesn't even really look like Keith was thinking about it. Can't wait for the cast to hit the muck. You do just print those folds in an ICM situation when you cover. And so therefore, I would just be a little bit more aggressive with C betting than perhaps you're even supposed to be.
This is kind of interesting. So the stacks are still wrong. This is me actually telling them at the time, I think, because it is quite important to have a good idea of what people's stacks are, because in this position, I don't remember exactly what the bounties are worth in chips, but I know that the two big bounties were still in play. There was a 10k and a 5k bounty. Bearing in mind it's a £400 tournament, so these are like massive bounties. Given that there's probably like 40-ish players in the money maybe, and with half the field left, so the bounty value is going to go up from the start. I imagine at the start it was probably worth, given that the bounties come in day two, there's probably 30% of the field left. It's probably going to be worth 3 starting stacks at the start of the day, about 90,000 chips, and now it's only going to have gone up. So it could be worth maybe 150,000 chips, somewhere between 100 and 200,000 chips if we were to actually work it out precisely. I'm sure I would have known at the time about what it was worth. When this guy goes all in here for, what is it, 6.25 bigs, there's actually almost his whole stack, maybe more than his whole stack in the middle for me if I just convert what his bounty is worth into chips. So given that 10-9 suited plays reasonably well, I can actually be ahead of some hands he's jamming. I've got really good equity against his jams. I think this is a hand that I definitely do want to continue with. It's just, what is the big blind doing? What's the big blind stack? And how am I going to respond if I call and then they raise? Or is it that I'm supposed to jam because I cover the big blind and I'm happy just to run it with this hand no matter what, and I want to get max fold equity? If the big blind has, let's say, 2 to 3 times more than this amount, I feel like I might as well just jam. If the big blind has a lot more and there's a chance I can get away from my hand, then maybe I can call and then fold. Or if it's in the middle, maybe I can just call for now, figure it out. Sometimes if the big blind overcalls, that's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking. You've got, obviously, I assume they're 20, so you've got at least 600-700k plus the chips you're playing with. It looks like you've got at least 900 to a million. So yeah, you definitely are going to probably be the big stack on the table. Okay, looks like you cover the big blind, and he's got like 40 bigs. Okay, this is really interesting actually. So we click it up, I guess planning to fold, but it looks like, this is what's bizarre. It looks like we've put a whole stack in, obviously. Let's say we do cover the 40 blinds. I think we probably just drill it in. You're going to make him fold a ton of hands, and the problem is if you call and he jams, he's going to jam a bunch of hands that you're doing really well against.
Yeah, like just broadways, king, queen off, ace, jack off, pocket
sevens,
eights.
Eights, ace five suited. Yeah, he's just, the fact that you're not dominated by ace, jack, ace, queen, king, jack's pretty amazing for us. And if he ever folds, he might fold pocket sixes. I've seen things that happen, particularly in a live environment. He might fold sixes or sevens. He definitely won't fold them if you call. I don't know whether, like I say, whether the graphic's right here or not. When we 3-bet here, this feels a little bit in the middle with this kind of combination. I feel like if you're going to play a click, you want to be a bit more polar, i.e. just a hand you definitely don't want to call with, or a hand you're snapping, right? It's these spots are really difficult. Yeah, like ace deuce off was the one that I had in my head when I made that comment, actually. Yeah. So like ace deuce off or kings, yeah, exactly. Where you're just using the blocker to leverage, and then you either have that or a snap call. I can see how this is reasonable. I just think the problem you've got here, mate, is if he jams, you're kind of priced it. I'd rather either just play a cool fold or a jam with this holding, I think.
I can see that. I mean, assuming the graphics are right, I bet what I am thinking is I don't want him to overcall with hands like king 10 offsuit, with hands like jack 10 suited. And I think in live environments where people aren't as familiar with the bounty element, like I know Ty, he is a good player, he's a live player. I don't think he'll be as familiar with the bounties and mystery bounties because no one is. They're such a new concept. and it's really hard to know how wide ranges can be in this spot. So I think when I click it there, I think he might even fold a hand like ace 10 offsuit. He might even fold a hand like king 10 suited, like you said, hands like pocket sixes, just because like he doesn't know what I'm clicking with here. He might just think it's really strong, or the fact that he doesn't know, he might just want to err on the side of caution, being deep in a live event. I think that's like a default way to see it. Again, not saying that this is right either, but just to get into my head in game, that when I call the six bigs, there's a chance he can overcall there and I'm out of position, which I don't want. But I thought the jam was maybe too big, that I didn't want to risk my whole stack, given that I thought his rejam range when I click it would then be so strong. So when I have clicked it, if he still goes all in here, that I think I'm doing so badly against that range that I can get away. Whereas if it was online, I'd have a completely different approach and think, oh, if I'm continuing, I might as well just jam because I'm not getting away from the rejam range. But given that it's live and it's such a different dynamic, I thought I had the room to get away. Whether that's right or wrong as well, but I think that's just what I was thinking in game.
I will add as well as me saying I disagree with the click. And again, we don't have the graphics definitely right, which makes it a bit of a pain. I will say that there's definitely a lot of ground for just remaining in the tournament with as many. That was a nice window. Oh, that's a good turn.
So you win
Nice hand.
tournaments.
So yeah, I think that it's a situation where live, just holding on to your stack is of such paramount importance compared to online for a variety of reasons. Particularly, our ROI tends to be higher. Keeping variance down feels more important. People are going to make more mistakes in every other hand in the future. So I feel like future game has way more weight, specifically in terms of stack preservation in a live environment, in my mind, because of the fact that online you're typically, a table full of often tough regulars, particularly if you're deep in a higher stakes tournament. You're not going to get as much EV in the future, and you're going to just have to take the EV you have now. Whereas in a live environment, not only are you going to have a bunch of EV in this hand, but every hand after, and therefore taking an approach like, let's say, for example, you click there, he jams as pocket kings, you get to fold it.
Hmm.
You don't have to put 40 of your 50, 60 big blinds in the middle and lose to kings. Whereas online, you just shrug and go, fair enough. I'm supposed to run into kings here. I think finding ways to maintain a big stat deep in a tournament live is definitely more important. And therefore, it's possible that something like the click there, which may in theory seem not to be that good, is going to be met with not enough aggression that it makes it better. So I hear where you're coming from, for sure.
I think if I was playing the spot again, I'm not exactly sure what I would do. But I feel like that six bigs is like that one fringe point where he is going to have hands that do want to overcall in position, and a lot of hands that I really don't want to be there. Uh, like an ace five suited maybe, or like maybe even like a queen 10 offsuit, like loads of hands might just flick it in for the bounty element with position. So I think if I'm continue, I think I should continue because I've got the equity and I cover, and then it's just whether to jam or yeah, make the exploit, click, fold. But jam probably better in theory. Click, maybe there's room for it live.
Yeah, this is the thing, right? It's hard to quantify a lot of the time because we don't know. We've not got the guy here telling us how he's going to respond versus those two actions, and it's kind of like
Yeah,
harder to guess, particularly when we don't know how much weight he's putting on the mystery bounty and the ICM. There's just so much going on that I think sometimes you've got to figure it out on the fly. Which is one of the joys of live, right? You're just in there figuring it out. There's lots of things we don't know exactly how it's all going to work. We've got to try and make the best decision we can, and obviously you did at the time, and it worked out. So let's go.
worked out this time. So here's an interesting spot. This guy has opened off 20 bigs from +2, nine-handed out of ace queen. So against his stack with the bounty element, my brain is telling me it's good enough to go broke. I'm out of position. I don't really want to flat very often. So I want to either free bet call or just jam, depending on what the big blind stack is. This is me checking the big blind stack right now. And the big blind is this guy, Ron, who's quite an interesting character. I watched some of his hands on stream before we got to these tables, these like last two tables, and he was doing some wild free bets and some wild post flop plays. And you'll see going forward that he is just a wild card, very like rare player for live poker. And I didn't also know, I think I was told the bounties were pulled. I didn't necessarily know he pulled them yet. So imagine you're playing a £400 tournament, you've just won 15k on break. I feel like that's going to make a big difference for like your amount of discipline in this tournament when you're going to need to probably win it to match the prize you've already won. And he's already like a loose player, so I was actually decided here if I just want to jam. But I think I realized that he's got like a million chips. He's got like 50 bigs here. Maybe he has 800k, I don't remember. But he has over 40 bigs. And I decided with ace queen, I'm going to go for the free bet to obviously commit versus this guy. And I think I'd get away if Ron gets involved. Even though I know he's active, a cold four bet I thought would be too strong for ace queen to kind of take the heat, especially in like what could be considered a soft live tournament where people are playing tight or people are making big mistakes. I don't just want to run it for like 50 bigs necessarily. If I jam here and Ron just calls with pocket fives because he's ready to gamble, or like even Jack 10 suited, or if he decides to just find ace king or jacks and I lose the flip, I think that would be pretty detrimental for my position in the tournament. Whereas free bet, get away if Ron gets involved, there's not that much variance because he's not going to get involved very often. But that's what was going through my head at the time. So what would you do here if, for example, Ron had less than 30 compared with Ron had 40 bigs, 50 bigs, 60 bigs? How would you approach this spot?
Yeah, good question. I think I'm with you if he's got 50 plus. Even if the guy's a bit of a wild card, even if you know he's 10 points deep and just won 15 bags on the break, doesn't mean he's just going to look at ace three suited and send it every time, particularly when you're covered. But he's probably more likely to get a bit more splashy. I think what often you find from recreationals or people that are a bit more wild is that they like cold calling three bets, and you're going to still be able to go to the streets if you make it like 150 and he calls or whatever and figure it out on the fly and hand read. So I wouldn't be so worried about that. But yeah, if he makes it, if he goes in and makes it a cold four, I'd be comfortable getting away from it as well, even with, like I say, the information. If he has like 35, 40 bigs, I think I'm still just fine jamming. It would just tap the table if he finds better. He might call off too wide, as you suggested. I think that, yeah, offsuit in general, if we're playing 35, 40 effective or less, I think I'm just all in. And then once it gets to the 40, 45, 50 region with the big blind, I would just play like a small three bet to commit to a deal. I think our range is comfortable doing that as well. Obviously, the best hands in our range just don't want to. It's kind of funny he finds ace jack, so we could see something interesting here because he's got one of the exact hands we're talking about. Might get a
It's
bit
stack strong
aggressive.
as well. Can see that he's got like 300, 400, 500, or like
Yeah,
600k back at this point, and he's made it. I think he's got over a million chips, so he's got over 50 bigs.
yeah.
Wow.
So he made it. Oh wait, he's about to act on his hand. Okay.
Yeah, he
Um,
called four bets the ace jack. I don't know if
Interesting.
if
I think you made it a bit big, by the way. I don't think you need to make it this large. I think that I would just use I don't think the deal's going to play that many flats, and I think that in a bounty tournament you're pretty much committed to him when you three bet. So I don't think you're going to be three betting as polar as usual because you're not going to have as many three bet folds. Given that
Hmm.
we think it's probably worth four blinds, the bounty, 4 or 5 blinds, maybe less obviously after the big bounties have just been pulled.
Probably like four blinds, yeah.
4 blinds. Yeah, I don't know how much three bet folding we get to do versus a 20 big stack with 4 blinds extra added on top once we put sort of 7, 8 bigs in the middle. So maybe you're literally maybe you've decided, and maybe this is best, by the way, you've just decided that is exactly the case. I never get to three bet fold, so I want a three bet sizing that sort of sends out the message I'm never three bet folding. But I think probably we get a pretty good job done, and then we give Ron less of a price. And we commit less against Ron's range, given that we're going to have to call off a deal anyway. And I don't think his range will change very much. Like if you make it 150 here or 180 here, I don't think a deal's continuing range changes very much, but you just give Ron 30, 40k more when he four bets you. I know this is might look a bit results orientated because in this case he did four bet us, but I still think we get a bit more, we make a bit more EV just making it a little bit smaller.
No, I'm with you. I think yeah, it's clear that well, relatively clear we're not folding against the deal no matter what once we free bet because we're putting in more than a third of his stack and it's pretty clear that we're committed. But yeah, against 20 generally, if it wasn't a bounty and I wasn't necessarily committing, I'd probably make it 3x at most, which would be 135 here. And I probably just thought, given that I'm giving away that I'm committed either way, that I might as well give him the worst price. But it's fine if he calls because there's just more chance I'm going to bust him for his bounty if he calls with more hands too. And if I have a hand
Yeah,
like king queen suited or like a linear hand ace 10 suited, maybe pocket eights, then giving him a better price to go post slot with a wider range isn't going to be bad for me. There's more chance I'll bust him that way.
yeah, and the other thing as well is, yeah, exactly, is that we're going to be, because we're three betting a linear range, sizes are smaller anyway, right? Because everything in your range is good. Typically, we use large sizings when we're polar, right? Because we either want to force money when we have aces or force fold equity when we have ace five or whatever. Here, we're just only going to have some kind of good hand. Interesting, Ron just comes in and gives us the finger, essentially. I feel like if we could get into his headspace, which obviously you're good at doing live, realize that this guy's just won 15k, it's possible he's not going to, he's got no fear anymore. He's just won 40 binds in the tournament. He's already a bit of a wild card. I feel like maybe with that kind of information, that might be enough to kind of sway you to jam. But the problem is that this is a live tournament again, right? All the stuff we've just been discussing for pretty much the duration of this video. If you get it wrong, losing 50 bigs here is an absolute disaster. When if you just fold and go, fine, I've still got 1.5 million, your EV in this tournament is massive. So it's always that I'm always a bit unsure with these big 4 or 5 bet moves, in live tournaments with stuff that's going to
You're
be
going to be
quite,
really sure.
yeah, you've got to be really sure. Exactly.
Yeah, at the time, I think I didn't even really think about this. I was just like, well, it's obvious I'm committing to this guy. I don't really have any bluffs. I've got a really strong range and he's still called four at me. Whatever, ace queen off. Like if I've got ace queen suited, maybe I'd call ace king. I'd run it. I think I would have folded like pocket nines. I'm not sure what I'd do with tens. Pocket jacks, maybe I'd peel to get it in on a safe board. just given that I cover him. But pocket tens, I think I'd probably just fold two, to be honest, and just play it really snug.
I think that's fine. I think that would be my approach in general, but I just feel like when you see it, I don't think this guy's looked down at ace jack and gone, oh, I'll four bet every time the ace is a black card. Do you know what I mean? He's just four betting every ace jack combo he looks at, I reckon, for example. So he might do it with that king queen. It's like now we know he's free four betting this hand. He's probably way over bluffing, you know, but it's easy to say that now. So
If I'm wrong, it's like you said, it's just too detrimental. Whereas if it's more of a small ball approach at this stage of the tournament, then I can afford to be wrong and like make decisions as I go and have less risk. But this is risking pretty much what, three quarters, maybe more of my stack potentially. I think he has like 1.1 million, and it's really hard to come back from that. But the stack I've got now, I'm just pretty comfortable with.
yeah, I got you. I think that
It
that's
stacks,
what I do a lot of. I would probably have
but still
found
wrong.
myself in the tank still. I'd have probably found myself in the tank, kind of like, oh, this is pretty gross, but also just that.
Yeah, and if it's a soft field, people are going to be giving you low variance gifts all the time too, so you don't need to take a high variance approach necessarily. Obviously, if you're at a tough table, tough tournament, lots of regs, completely different situation.
Yeah, that's again what we've sort of highlighted a couple of times here. Just a lot of the time in live, just keep your bum in your seat with a big stack, and stuff will happen. Good things will just happen. You know, you don't need to leverage it all with 50 left when in a minute someone's just going to call wherever they shouldn't. You know what I mean? Let you get a huge value bet through.
6-4 suited here in the cutoff, similar to what we spoke about before. There's short stacks afterwards. I think I get Ron's on the button too, and he's clearly like a wild card. He might free bet me and call too much. This is pretty weak hand. I do cover everyone, so there is incentive for me to play. There is obviously ICM pressure on people, but I think I'd rather just expand in like ace-7 offsuit, ace-6 offsuit, maybe even every offsuit ace before I get in with a hand like this, or like a king-4 suited would get in there first.
Yeah, I'd open every suited king, probably every suited queen here. I feel like I would maybe find myself. It depends. It's hard to tell with the stacks, right? If the blinds have both got around 30, where they're not really going to rejam a lot, I think I'd still probably open there. It's probably fine with Ron, like you say, with the information you had at the time. And then if you've got a tight button, I'm always in there, I think.
Well, YouTube died on us, so I guess the end of today's part is going to be cut short, but we can be back. All right, that's going to be the end of part one. So we just got down to 15 players. We'll have loads of ICM spots, loads of interesting PKO spots, and it will go all the way to heads up. Max, if there's anything you want to share, anywhere that anyone can find you, if they want to find you, if they like your analysis, which I think they should, it's very good.
Thank you. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram. It's just Max Sanders 91, and I'm on Twitch. I think it's Kid1591 or 91 Kid15.
All the links in the description of Twitch, Instagram, or like whatever anyone uses, anywhere they can find you. Thanks for watching. We'll be back for the next part soon.
Yeah,
Peace.
take care, guys. Hope you enjoyed.